Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. We're going to be removing this driveway and the apron approach. The apron approach we have to get a permit for. The inspector will be arriving on this site during this video, and we'll be talking to him a little bit about how we're going to put it back in. Joints, PSI, little odds and ends like that. Giovanni's here with the Super 10. Those initials are from the homeowner's kids, brother and sister. The brother was in the Marines in Afghanistan. He didn't make it back, so that's why we're saving those initials. We're going to cut around that, save that block of concrete. That was real important. Here's Andy with the skid steer, New Holland with the breaker attachment, and here's the inspector. Hi, how's it going?
Good, good. So we're replacing existing, right?
Yeah, initially I wanted to go right to this cold joint, and then do a horizontal to get rid of this little thing, but I don't know if they didn't like that idea.
Yeah, we have to just replace existing.
Oh, okay.
Whatever's existing, we can't go up smaller or bigger.
Oh.
So,
okay.
yeah, that's per our municipal code.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So basically, remove existing, and that's it.
Yeah, that was my plan.
Okay.
Because I went down, I tried to get that, like I said, but they weren't going for it. So then I reduced it down to just this. Because I guess there's something in there where if you're widening it, the garage door or something has to be the same width as the opening of the apron approach. Is there something like that?
Something like that within our municipal code.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's why when people do replace their approaches, it's just the existing approach.
Oh, I
nothing
see.
bigger, nothing smaller. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what they voted for. So.
Yeah, that's what you go with then. Is this got to be 6 inches deep on this? I imagine it does.
Yes,
huh?
Yes.
So basically it's just remove and replace. I mean, we don't have to modify any of the base under it.
No.
Because it's already there, I suppose. They did it right the first time, right?
Some of them I saw there wasn't that no base. It was just native ground, compacted.
Oh,
so,
that's all you require then?
Yeah. That's all
okay. Oh, that's easy then. Just
if it is base,
that's great. That's a
great.
bonus.
Yeah, that's a bonus. Exactly. Yeah. So,
I did this entire all the way around this house, and I put base under everything, and then I'm gonna base the driveway too. But
okay.
I mean, if I have over 6 on this when I remove it, I could potentially put base to bring it up to 6, huh? If I wanted to, or just pour it deep. Either way.
Either way, whatever.
3250 psi.
3250.
City mix.
Broom fittage.
And that's the city mix design. What does that mean? No fly ash in it? Is that the idea behind city mix?
Yes.
No fly ash? Do you know the reason for no fly ash? Because people always ask me, what's the difference? And I really don't. I think.
You know what? I don't see any difference. It's just what our city engineer.
There's a reason behind it. I'm not sure what it is, but I like the pure cement myself. A lot better than fly ash. To me, fly ash is just a cheap substitute for cement, because it's waste is what it is. So they figure out, well, what do I do with it? And now they throw it in the concrete, and then we get an inferior product, is what I believe. But that's just me. Anyway, so I guess you'll come back out here on the pour day for the approach, huh?
Yes, I just need to just see it being poured and then just take a picture of the ticket. That's basically.
What about your joint pattern? Is there any joints on this? Do you want any?
Yeah, if you can, just. Man, I don't know.
Well, you can see there's a crack right in the middle, so that might be a good place for one.
Yeah.
Because of the distance, I suppose.
Yeah, just join it right in the middle. Because some of them, they're not even jointed.
Yeah.
They're all monolithic, or cracked.
Yeah, they're in bad shape for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Hi, Natalie.
Need anything before I go?
Nope, we're good.
Okay.
Here's the inspector. He's gonna check. He's checking this out.
Morning, Steve.
How you doing?
Good.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. What's the final?
Well, we can't. We're not gonna be able to widen it, so it has to just go in and out the same way. No modifications, basically.
So there's no way to make an exception?
No.
So the only reason I ask is we have so little street parking that's a real value added for the neighborhood to be able to put one more car.
Yeah,
off the street.
it's per our municipal code, and we can't change that unless it's a council approved.
Oh, you got to go to the council and then see if, and get a vote,
Yes.
like yay nay thing.
Yes.
What's involved in that?
A lot.
You got to show up at council meeting. You got to submit probably
You have to
what you
submit-
want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Then they have to call a council meeting. Then you have to be there. Then they have to vote on it, right?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And would that be for an exception for the whole neighborhood or just one property?
This is for the municipal code, so.
Oh, that
that's-
would change the whole code
that
of the
would
whole
change
city.
Code of the city, exactly.
Ah.
So it can't just be a one-time thing.
Oh yeah,
It needs to change the municipal.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you were to make an exception here, then everyone in the neighborhood could say, "Hey, well, you did that one. Now we can do it too." And
Yeah.
you know, you open up a can of worms, basically.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's a lot involved.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's going to happen anyway eventually because of the push toward high density housing and the ADUs, and they're trying to move more people into neighborhoods.
That's
But
right.
there's no parking, so where are you going to put the cars?
I know. You used to not be able to put more rooms unless you had
Have to,
parking, but
Yeah.
now, I mean, they allow ADUs, but the parking doesn't change.
No,
So
it's the same.
that doesn't make sense either, huh?
Mhm.
Oh well.
Yeah.
What can you do, huh?
Okay, well, it is what it is for now. For
I know.
now. It's a big dollar commitment, though, to not be able to,
Do it
yeah.
what you wanted, yeah.
Okay, we'll go forward curb.
All right, thanks, man.
Thank
No problem. Yeah, you guys do good work. I'm subscribed to your YouTube channel.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so.
So you don't mind being on YouTube then, huh?
Nah.
Because I got my head cam running. All right, that was kind of interesting. Now here's Andy getting ready to break some concrete out. I already took my mini skid steer back in this corner because I didn't want him to have to try to squeeze in there and potentially damage something. So I took the mini, kind of broke up in those little tight, hard to reach areas. Now he's out here in the wide open space with this big unit just blowing up concrete. And this breaker is a massive breaker attachment. You can see how easy it breaks it up. Matter of fact, with his particular breaker, it hits so hard, what I have to do with him is I keep him away from the walls. I start him out about 2 feet, and then I come in with the mini, and then I'll get along like block walls or things that are going to potentially vibrate, because that thing's hitting hard enough to where it's actually shaking the ground. So if there's like a wall next to it, you know, it could potentially crack it or knock a couple bricks loose. Now we've got some artificial turf along the side here, and I'm going to be using that recycled plastic bender board landscape form, and I'm going to just push that up against the artificial turf, pour against it, leave that plastic form liner along the edge of that grass, and that'll be finished product. There's an old irrigation line that used to go to a natural lawn. Now that's artificial turf. That irrigation line doesn't work anymore. You can see there's some wire mesh over here at the lower end on this driveway addition that someone had did at one time or another. And that's a sleeve, that pipe that you see there coiled up, that's a sleeve for the cable. But that's been abandoned as well, because they actually came in and they actually cored from the other side of the approach diagonally to that side yard, and they've ran a new one. Now here's the plastic liner I'm putting in here to pour up against this grass or artificial turf. And we're just going to match the elevation of the turf, because we don't want to have to take the turf out and regrade it and reset all the turf, recut it, maybe make a seam, maybe not. You never know when you start pulling out and placing new concrete, so we're just going to go right up against it nice and tight. Because the concrete came out deep and we've changed elevations a little bit, we're going to put base on everything. This is crushed concrete. Now here's the apron approach coming out. Also, we're going to get one more inspection. That first inspection that you seen earlier, that was just a pre-inspection to see if I could widen this thing. And now the next inspection is going to check out the subgrade to see if it's tight, see if it's 6 inches deep, because the off-site, especially where the driveway occurs, has to be 6 inches deep, including a sidewalk if there was one. But in this case, the sidewalk and apron approach is all one piece. Definitely not an ADA compliant type sidewalk. So all we have to do on the approach is maintain 6 inches deep for the new pour. The driveway we're going to do about 4.5 inches. Also, we're going to do a thickened edge where it meets the approach. A lot of times you'll see the approach 6 inches, and then right away it'll go to a 4-inch driveway. But in this case, we're going to go 6 to 6 with the thickened edge along the driveway. So if you had watched any of the previous videos around this particular project, you'd know that I have a stub out drain pipe that I put under the front patio before I poured it. So now I've just exposed where I buried it, and now I'm continuing it down here into the corner of that artificial turf. You know, since we have the approach out, we could have potentially, you'd think, well, why don't you just go through the the apron approach at this point? Well, technically you can't, because you can't have the drain within the approach itself. You would have to take another panel out and then core drill. And then we had the water meters right there, so this was the best spot for this. So it's just a pop-up, and I cut the grass out to fit the pipe, repack the soil around it, and just drop that little floating lid. So when the water comes down through that pipe from the backyard, it'll push that lid up, and the water will just flow over the sidewalk into the gutter. It may not even ever get water in it, actually, the way that we've set this whole project up with the drainage plan. We're saving the one tree there just to soften the edges of the house. You could leave a tree, or you could throw a big old pot there if you went solid concrete. The trouble with pots on concrete is usually they have weep holes in the bottom of them, and you have that soil in there, the potting soil, and then as the water goes through a potting soil and it leaches out the bottom, it could stain the concrete. So it's probably better just to have a box out in your concrete. Although it does create more crack points when you do a box out in concrete. So we have to join it off of all the corners of that box out now. Here's your compaction technique. First we compacted the native because it was mildly disturbed from the tractor driving through there. Plus we don't even know if they compacted that to begin with when they put the first pour in. So we'd take care of that, and then we'd put the road base, compact it again. Now those 2 holes I dug underneath the existing is where it's kind of like a keyway. Instead of drilling into the side of the concrete, I just dig underneath it a little bit, and that way it kind of locks those 2 pieces of concrete together. Helps from the elevation shift. Now right now, since we're on a radius and I'm setting this form for the apron approach, we can't pour it monolithic because we're doing stamped concrete on the driveway, colored. Pebble from Davis, integral. We can't do them simultaneously in this situation. Would have been nice, but we can't because of the different things that are going on. So we're going to have to form out for the approach. I'm using this is Proline material. They actually make this, and it's a 2x6. The problem with it is I've used some other plastic, like plastic form. Some of them make them the exact same size as lumber. But in this particular case, which I kind of didn't like, the 2x6 is actually a real 2x6. It's not 1.5 by 5.5. So that kind of makes it difficult when you're trying to marry 2 boards together in different, not in this particular situation, but in other situations when you're trying to marry lumber with this plastic and they're different sizes, it just doesn't work. So I really don't care for it, to be honest. This is Proline, by the way, that I got in this particular case. Now on the field, we got Owens Corning pink bar, 3/8 diameter, equivalent to 1/2 inch steel. Here's a couple more little keyway holes, lock in this concrete, rather than drilling. Because you know what happens when you drill, especially 4-inch concrete, if you drill in, you put your rebar dowels in there, and if there is a shift or anything like that, the pressure from the rebar in those holes could actually just crack off the top of the rebar if there is movement. I've seen that happen on a few occasions, especially with steel, because you got a cold joint and water goes in there, rusts the steel out, and then explodes the concrete. But you know, Owens Corning, you could drill that in, it wouldn't matter. So here's the layout. We're about 18-inch centers on this reinforcement. We got some screeds set in the middle. We got the 2x6 there, and then it transitions to 4 because it's not in the driveway. Now in the driveway for vehicle traffic, it's got to be 6. That's Public Works code. And I just painted those stakes because we're going to have those stakes overnight, you know. I like to paint them, make them bright in case someone tries to walk through here at night or any time for that matter. Otherwise, you could trip over them pretty easily. We have Meta Concrete here. He's a privateer. He just pulls concrete out wherever they'll give it to him from and delivers it. In other words, he uses other people's batch plants to bring his rig there and load it. But I believe he's batching out of Bender's Ready Mix. That's where he's loading out of. Fiberglass hand float there. 6-foot Milwaukee red stick. 3-foot wood bowl float. Oh, I have a new policy now. What I do now is I take cylinders of every job and then I label them with the job address. That way, what I can do, if need be, is I save all these cylinders from every job and I put the job address. So that way, if I ever have to take one of these samples to the lab to have tested, it's a lot easier than coring holes in the concrete, and it's less expensive. So by taking it to a testing lab, what they can tell you is what's in the concrete, how it was made, all the different ingredients, if there was any of additives of any sort, and they can give you the PSI. It's an expensive test, but they can break it down. Now as we're pouring out, we're pulling up this reinforcement with a 5th wheel hook. That's what you would use to detach a 5th wheel from your truck without having to climb underneath it and reach over there. We're going to be stamping this with a Belgium slate seamless texture mat. It just kind of gives it like a stone finish. One load did this. The max that these concrete trucks will carry, legally on the road, which is 10 cubic yards. That's what we had in this truck, and it was enough. So also within this video, you're going to see us strip this, saw cut it, pressure wash it, and pour the apron approach. You can see after you bowl float it the opposite direction from the first pass, you'll find holes here and there, and that's when you start sprinkling concrete back where needed. Now here's a 5-foot wide Fresno. This is the first pass out by hand on the sliders. Because of all the Fresnoing and prep work before that, it makes this pass much easier. I am going to put one joint in this the day of the pour, and that's right off of the corner of the house, because that's an area that may crack overnight before you get back to saw cut. So we'll put a joint there to get through the evening. and then we'll saw cut everything else.
Yeah, I'll do a pre-approach. You want to come in the day before to look at it, or just pouring? I just need to see. Well, you're pouring Thursday, right? I'll be here Wednesday. I'll look at the stuff, and then I'll be here Thursday.
So he's got a 20-inch by 4-inch trowel, rounded on both ends. And that's really not a pull trowel, because if you notice the shank is long to the ends of the trowel. That's really the difference between a pull trowel and a concrete trowel, is the length of that shank on top of the steel. If it's like 4 inches back from the other end of the trowel, then it's a pull trowel. But if it comes really close to the ends, then it's not a pull trowel. Pull trowels are very flexible on the ends because there's a lot of contours to follow. And with concrete, it's typically flat, like this is. Now it's about stamp time. This is the liquid release we'll be using. We'll use a little garden pump up sprayer, sprayed on the concrete. Also, before I stamp, I also spray the bottom of the mats. And if you did like an antique color release prior to this particular job, or a job without any antiquing release, you'd want to clean your mats first, wipe them off with the release agent, because you don't want to transfer that to another job. In this case, we're not using antique release, it's just clear. And it models out really nicely as it cures out, just because of the contour of it. There, I just switched out. Now somebody else is running the pounder. So you notice how we worked at the lower end first, because that's where it had the most sun, and then as we worked to the top where it's shaded, it had more time to dry out before we got up here. That way we could maintain pretty uniform impression throughout the whole job. And last but not least, the part that was fully shaded the entire time and it took the longest to dry. And that's where we're ending up. So you just follow the concrete. You got to do what the concrete does to get to the end. Here's the next day, doing some layout, snapping some lines. We're going to run a couple lines off of each side of that tree, a little box out for the planter. So you get a line there, that's about 2 feet apart. And then every other line will be about 7 feet apart. And we're going to be using the Medusa by Skill. And then I adapted that to the DeWalt cordless vacuum. Sometimes I roll that thing around and it follows me when I put it on wheels, the vacuum. But in this case I'm on a slope, so I didn't go with the wheels, otherwise it would have ended down in the gutter every time. Now we have inspection for this approach the very next day. So I'm trying to minimize how much water really accumulates down there. So I have a wet vac going at the bottom, getting the water out of there as quick as possible so we don't oversaturate that. Then also we created a dam here. As you can see there, all the water is pooling in the gutter, and then I have the vac running getting all the debris before it ends up going down the street. So now we're ready for the apron approach pour, and this is a nice flyover view. And you can see how much that color concrete has faded since it cured out a bit. This is only a few days right now. But you can see the fiber mesh too. See how within the cuts? I had forgotten to mention that. Actually, I added fiber mesh to all this as well. But that's what enables you to be able to saw cut the very next day, is that fiber mesh. You don't get the spalling. You get nice clean cuts. And that's due to the fiber. Inspector just checked the subgrade. He really is loving it. Jumped up and down on it and said, man, I don't even need a probe for this thing. This thing's hard as a rock. But this is the reason why it's hard as a rock. Plate compaction, just the right amount of moisture, all these little details get you to the end. Here's a little curb patch. I really wanted to saw cut this out and increase the opening, but since we couldn't do it, we've got a little patch mix here. This stuff doesn't require any glue. It has a dry polymer in it for bonding, so it's ready to go. Just add water, mix it, throw it in there. What I did when I was pressure washing the driveway, I actually pressure washed out that hole or that gap in the curb. That way I know it's nice and clean for this patchwork. I'm going to try to mix this stuff pretty stiff. It's probably a little bit stiffer than a pancake mix. And I just used my trowel as a form. I just stuck it into the dirt, flush to the backside of curb. Now that's on a cold joint of where the two sections of L curb meet. So there's going to be movement there regardless, which means it's going to want to crack. So what I'll do is I'll actually create a new joint in between the two. I'll carve out a little bit of that patchwork, so if it does want to crack, it can without popping the patch. We had to kind of rebuild this little curb face as well. There, I just kind of carved out the joint. But this stuff is really nice, that patch. I hadn't used it before, but it cured out like the same exact color as the concrete, so it was barely even visible unless you knew it was done. So it was that good. I laid a little plastic because you know when you're tailgating a 4-inch slump, 3250 psi, it has a tendency to splatter. Plus, I didn't, you know, you're getting in and out of the concrete, tracking concrete around on freshly stamped color concrete. They don't go well together if you track concrete around. So we got a little plastic to protect the edge. We're running the Milwaukee vibrator. Also, we got a new tool here. We've got also the Milwaukee screed. It's a battery operated screed, and it worked out really nice. It basically bull floated it and screeded it all at the same time. And we're on a slope here. This is about an 8% slope, so that's, you know, typically you're not going to see anyone run one of these on that kind of a slope. It's usually designed for, you know, probably a 3-4% max on a slope, but we did it anyway just to test it out, and I like the possibilities of it. Little excess concrete there. But the one thing you don't want is a lot of excess concrete on these job sites, because there's really nowhere to get rid of it. You gotta bag it and take it to the next time you do a tear out, basically. Here's a 1/2 inch radius edger, and it's a little bit wider than the average. It's about an 18 inch. Here's a little 3-foot wide Fresno. Now, you know, when I saw cut the driveway, I actually laid the joint pattern out to kind of center on the approach. That way I could carry my joint through from the saw cut through the middle of the approach and line up with the existing crack in the flow line. If you remember the beginning of the video, it showed the crack right down the center. Well, that's where I put the saw cut and the joint, because it could be like a potential like fault right there, fault line. And there's a crack, and I looked all the way across the street. That crack that goes through the curb and gutter right there, it goes all the way across the street right through the next driveway. Not that joint, but the middle of the approach. That particular crack goes right through the flow line, curb and gutter, all the way across the street through the neighbor's driveway. And it goes through that garage floor as well. So I wanted to get that joint saw cut lined up with where that crack was, basically.
Well, my baby.
Yep. Looking good. This is broom time.
Oh.
100% nylon. And we're brooming this a little earlier than we normally would, because this is the approach and it's got a pretty good slope here. Cheers. Oh, yeah. Oh, what a move.
Sit.
Looking good, Juan. There's one little spot over there, I think. It's a little right there, yeah.
Where, Papa?
See that where it got rough?
Okay, I checking now.
Just broom it again, see.
Broom it again?
Yeah, see if it'll broom out smoother. Yeah, that's working. Broom
Maybe
the-
I can go like
yeah,
this.
yeah, the whole thing.
Perfect.
Oh, that's it, yeah. That's muy magnifico. Oh. Sale suche.
See?
Tu magnifico. Well, that turned out real nice. That about wraps up this video. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and have a good day.